Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video of myself, Jonathan MS Pearce, or as Nicholas Lynn says in the live chat, let's get this party started. Now, I don't know whether you can label in-depth talk about global geopolitics as a party, but to the extent that one can, I allow you to party in the live threads. Thank you very much for hat solidarity, brothers and sisters. I appreciate that. I'm still wearing my red hat of Greenland. Of course I wore that red hat because of Greenland. Of course that's what I was thinking. Okay, it's great to have you on board again. I feel bad that I keep taking up all of your time with me wittering on about geopolitics, but like every day is so packed full of immense amount of stuff that's happening. And when you have someone like Donald Trump, he's the gift that keeps on giving because he just can't shut up and says ridiculous things about everything. And so then everyone has to react to that. And it's not a case of, oh, we should stop giving him the oxygen by talking about him, because that is true in many cases. But in certain cases, it is that his speech and his rhetoric is representative of his feelings and his desires, and that turns into actions given half the chance. And his administration give him more than half the chance, because actually some of those crazy things that he wants to do, they are in line with what some of the other people in his administration want to do as well. And so Trump's ridiculous rhetoric at the moment is important, right? And we should not ignore it. And in fact, it's causing quite the upset in Greenland. And we're going to be coming to that in a second. Thanks to all of you for being here in a live chat. Thank you to Benny Pie, who is already in the background putting comments like this for me to look at. So thank you, Benny. Nice hat. Thank you. I do enjoy these lives at BME. So that is why I am here. Am I getting another pizza? That was not Pizzagate yesterday on my live stream, where just before I came on, I was shouting at my kids. It was all going wrong. My tech was going wrong. I was like, and I felt really bad for having to shout at my kids. And then Betty Pie was in the background listening to me shout at my kids. And it turns out my partner bought Finn a pizza for some weird reason. I don't know what. Maybe she couldn't be bothered to cook, but it was only like 5 o'clock. I don't know. She wasn't back from work, and so anyway, that was Pizzagate. That was rather bizarre. But anyway, I'm here. Thank you for being here. I have so much to talk about. So let's get on with it. And it is going to be fairly wide ranging. We're going to talk about energy. I was wondering whether I should just have a separate video on this, but it'd be so niche, hardly anyone will watch it. So I'm going to catch you all in here and talk to you about energy in a while, because things are changing. And I did spend some time talking about this yesterday with regard to Donald Trump being in the 1980s and 1990s in terms of where he thinks oil is and how he thinks it's a scarce resource, and everyone's piling into Venezuela. We hear again today that actually no one's interested in going to Venezuela for that oil. I think there's further analysis coming out or further commentary that some of these oil executives aren't so interested in going to Venezuela, and that kind of undermines his position on Venezuela. So that's interesting. And then I'm going to talk to you about sort of renewables and where they are in the world with regard to trying to work out energy policy as it should be for nations like the US going forward, and whether, doubling down on oil is important, so on and so forth. So lots to talk to you about, as I keep saying. Right, okay, let's get to it. And before I do so, as ever, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. It should be no time really from your daily routine to just press that like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Press the bell icon and select all rather than personalized, and it keeps you in the loop as to what is going on. Right, let's get to it. So we're going to start with our best mate, Sergei Lavrov. Good old Sergei, a bit of Russian. He's an old hand, isn't he? A wizened old man is Sergei Lavrov, but there's been talk recently that he's been sort of, I don't know that he was kind of sidelined possibly recently, and I don't know whether there are issues between some of these big names in the Kremlin. But anyway, Lavrov said, when the United States begins to act while ignoring all the norms that it itself promoted, it leads one to conclude that our American colleagues are unreliable. This is interesting. So you've had so much rhetoric from the Russians saying, hey, Trump is our guy, he's on side, the Europeans are annoying. And then things have been happening recently where the US has been sanctioning Russian ships, a lot to do with Venezuela. and the Russian energy industry is somewhat crippled, and they're looking to the US as maybe changing course a little bit. And Lavrov here is now saying, well, actually, our American friends are unreliable, and that's going to be in the context, of course, again, of Iran as well as Venezuela, and all these nations that are in the Russian sphere of influence seem to be losing their prevalence on the global stage, or certainly having their power undermined by the United States. The US saying it's going to go into Iran possibly. Lavrov reacting to this: when the US resorts to unfair competition methods, it indicates that the US competitive position is deteriorating. And I don't know whether he's talking about Venezuelan oil there. But talking about oil, Phillips O'Brien just brought this out a couple of minutes ago, and I've been talking about how the Lukoil and Rosneft sanctions have really worked, and Russian oil is struggling with regard to volume going to India and to China and so on and so forth. Phillips O'Brien says, remember when we were being told how harsh Trump's sanctions would be on Russian oil sales? Well, the reality is very different. He says, after rising in October and November, Russian revenue was down only 2% in December. Moreover, Chinese purchases were up. Chinese purchases of Russian oil was up by 23% in December. The Chinese are laughing at the US sanctions. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on here with regard to how much is. And I know there are differences between deliveries and orders. And so you want to look at deliveries in a couple of months' time to see what is being ordered right now. So, yeah, that's definitely some contradictory claims coming from Phillips O'Brien there. Null Report says on the economic side of things, but now going to Ukraine's steel industry is recovering. Pig iron outputs rose 11.2% in 2025, rolled metal by 4.8%, still below pre-war levels, but progress is clear. EU demand for non-Russian metals helps, but risks remain. Power outages, tariffs, high costs. Ukraine says a key industrial player, stays a key industrial player, despite the war. I would like to know, I don't know if I don't know from looking at this how much goes abroad, because we understand that their industry is really churning out things like armored vehicles, and they have the capacity to produce even more. They don't even particularly need armored vehicles now coming from abroad. Infantry fighting vehicles are a different matter, but things like your mobility vehicles and MRAPs and whatnot. And I guess for all of those sorts of pieces of equipment and all the weapons they're making, they're going to need lots of steel. How much actually goes abroad, though? I mean, it seems pretty precipitous, these drops coming from 2021. Look at that. Wow. I mean, I don't know what each of these different sections are, but whatever it is, whatever type of steel or whatever, they have taken a heck of a hit over the course of the war. But anyway, I thought I'd throw that one in there. Now, from Venezuela to Iran, Kiev Independent says, well, actually, a US envoy says, Trump shows, quote, how weak Russia really is. Or an ex-US envoy. Trump demonstrates he is, quote, increasingly comfortable with the use of force on the global stage, Kurt Volker said in an interview with the Kiev Independent. And I think there is definitely this reality now that Ukraine has spent 4 years showing that Russia really is a paper tiger. Trump said this at the UN General Assembly when he had that True Social post that was really pro-Ukrainian that came out while we had just given a speech. Then he was speaking to Zelensky, then to Macron. And somehow he wrote this huge speech. So I don't know who actually wrote that for him, not a speech, huge post. But that came out on True Social, where he said he indeed talked about Russia. I think his term was it was a paper tiger in that post, and talked about how precarious the economy was. I think Trump is showing, I think everyone is showing that Russia is not what they thought Russia was in terms of strength of economy and military. But the key is Trump knowing that. And then because I think Trump doesn't like weakness and he doesn't like to back losers, that's partly why he keeps backing Russia. He says, look at the size of the country, it's huge. And actually, interestingly, Cheryl Watley pointed this out. Apparently, Trump looked at a map and said how big Greenland was. But of course, like I said, that's a Mercator projection. You take the Mercator projection and put it back, you look at a globe and see Greenland compared to other nations, it's not quite as big as you would think it is. So I think he does get biased by this this sense of how big a nation or a landmass is, and then that leads him to think that it's more important than it really is. And I think he thinks Russia is stronger than it is by looking at the size of it, looking at the population compared to Ukraine, and then having a sense of Russia from the Soviet era and projecting the Soviet era onto modern day Russia and thinking it's a really strong thing. But if he had a real handle on how weak it is economically and militarily, I would say conventionally, and certainly the ground forces, arguably in the air to some degree as well, and the Black Sea Fleet has been somewhat diminished too. Like I think he would probably do a lot more to help Ukraine, because I think he's the sort of guy that once he senses blood, he will double down. And I just think we need to get to this tipping point where Trump sees that Russia is not the horse to back anymore. And you could argue that he's getting there, that there is this sense that that Russia is weaker. Now, Politico reports that the EU may appoint a separate negotiator to handle contacts with Putin. This idea that they need their own Steve Witkoff. And I was thinking when I heard about this, I think this came out last night, but I was wondering, who would you choose, or this morning, who would you choose from a European point of view? It'd have to be, I mean, why Steve Witkoff works for the United States is partly because Trump doesn't really care for Ukraine, and actually he wants to help Russia. So he's chosen a guy that is easily manipulated himself by Russia and is possibly even compromised by Russia. And so that's the right guy to use as an intermediary, given that you don't care about Ukraine. But if you care about Ukraine, but you want that same kind of person, because most, you imagine you chose someone like Kaya Kallas or I don't know, any other fairly standard European diplomat, they are going to be deeply anti-Russian, and therefore Russia will not appreciate having them as a go-between. And so will that, what kind of person do you choose that gets you what you want to achieve from any kind of interaction with Putin, with Russia? But the idea is supported by France and Italy to get this kind of go-between, as well as parts of the European Commission and a number of other countries. Process has taken place amid a stalemate in the White House's peace initiatives and concerns that the United States could reach an agreement with Russia behind Europe's back. So there you go. That was a bunch of European stuff, or a bunch of Ukraine-related stuff, but there isn't too much news on Ukraine. We will return to ideas of Ukraine and European politics. I just want to take us back. Well, this is still kind of European politics. I want to take you back to Greenland. I've done a number of videos. I even did a breaking, sort of overnight update this morning. Things are just moving so quickly. Donald Trump, although at the same time we're still at the same kind of place, Donald Trump has made another couple of announcements. Here's one. The United States needs Greenland for the purpose of national security. It is vital for the Golden Dome that we are building. NATO should be leading the way for us to get it. If we don't, Russia or China will, and that is not going to happen. Militarily, without the vast power of the United States, much of which I built during my first term and am now bringing to a new and even higher level, NATO would not be an effective force or deterrent, not even close. It's so me. It always is. They know that, and so do I. They know that, and so do I. NATO becomes far more formidable and effective with Greenland in the hands of the United States. I mean, I think that is utterly misguided. I think Greenland will become no different under the United States control in terms of what the United States is able to do right now. And arguably, I was going to say militarily, but arguably economically as well. I think those rare earth metals and minerals, the US can access them. And of course, if they had control of the whole of Greenland, then they wouldn't have to pay sort of Denmark to access them or whatnot. But then they'd have to pay Denmark to get hold of Greenland. So it's kind of the same. I think there's a lot more going on here. And I think, as I said yesterday, the tech broligarchs and interests are probably playing a part here. Anything less than that is unacceptable. So he's saying anything less than Greenland being as a part of the United States is unacceptable. Thank you for your attention, blah, blah, blah. Then he said this: NATO, tell Denmark to get them out of here now. 2 dog sleds won't do it. Only the USA can. Danish intel warned last year. So what he's then sharing a news piece from last year because he's been claiming that the waters are teeming with Russian and Chinese vessels, and then people are coming back to say no, they're not. There's hardly any, if perhaps even zero, Chinese and Russian vessels, including submarines, in Greenlandic maritime territory. And then he's obviously churned up some news piece from last year saying Danish intelligence was warned last year about Russian and Chinese military goals toward Greenland and Arctic. So that's a military goals. Yeah, they may have military goals, but we've got NATO on Greenland at the moment. Like, US, you're already there doing NATO stuff. You pulled 17 bases away from there since the Cold War ended. So this is just ridiculous. But anyway, like, not only is he trying to establish the US kind of right by might to Greenland, but he's just really insulting of Denmark. I mean, honestly, Donald Trump is an absolute knob. He is such a dislikable human being, but he's also horrible for international cooperation. NATO, tell Denmark to get them out of here now. 2 dog sleds won't do it. Only the USA can. He's just an absolute dimwit. Now, what is happening is that Europe seemed to be mobilizing. So we hear that Denmark is sending troops as we speak, I think, to Greenland. They have mobilized their troops. France is to open a Greenland consulate and has demanded the US end its blackmail, quote, blackmail. France's decision to open a consulate in Greenland is more than a diplomatic formality. It's a clear political signal. By accusing the United States of blackmail over Greenland, Paris is openly pushing back against President Donald Trump's renewed pressure to acquire the autonomous Danish territory, said Skandalv. This move reinforces European support for Denmark and Greenland at a moment when sovereignty in the Arctic is being tested. The timing matters. As Danish and Greenlandic foreign ministers meet Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington, analysts are already warning that a failure to de-escalate could have consequences far beyond Greenland, potentially straining NATO itself. Greenland's prime minister has been unambiguous, stating that Greenland chooses Denmark, not the United States, against a backdrop. Trump's insistence that the island will be acquired one way or the other turns a regional dispute into a broader test of alliance's credibility and the limits of pressure politics in the Western Bloc. Now, we have, I think, a really dangerous situation where there are all sorts of pressures ramping up. You've got the Europeans setting up consulates in Greenland. You've got Emmanuel Macron coming out yesterday in support very overtly of Greenland. The Greenlandic premier and the Danish prime minister coming out saying we'd much rather, or the Greenlander saying he'd much rather Greenland was a part of the EU and Denmark than the United States. And yet the United States is saying, you know, come what may, we're going to have you. And you've then had people like Randy Fine as representative coming out with this new bill that has that seeks annexation of a NATO ally, Denmark's territory of Greenland. French President Macron, we do not underestimate the declarations on Greenland. If the sovereignty of the European country and ally were to be affected, the knock-on effects would be unprecedented. France is monitoring the situation with the greatest attention and will align its action in full solidarity with Denmark and its sovereignty. So yeah, France is being really strong here. And I think there's always been an element of anti-American feeling in France, and that's why, you know, they have never been on board with buying American tech. They will make their own military equipment. They don't. The whole ITAR thing is anathema to them, and that's actually now, I think, proving to be a very wise decision, as countries like the UK have been so dependent on the US. When the US goes a bit rogue, we don't quite know what to do because we have that dependence on the US. Now, Denmark is underway in moving more troops to Greenland in cooperation with undisclosed allies. Preparatory staff are in place to solve logistics for potential larger Danish forces. Details are sparse, but dr.dk reports the first plane landed 2 days ago. So the Danish media reporting that Denmark is ramping up there in its presence on Greenland. And then we have here the incoming Dutch Prime Minister. So we've been talking about Dick Schoof recently, who is an outgoing Dutch Prime Minister, but they had elections really quite recently. And you had the pro-European Dutch Prime Minister now taking the helm. and he really is pro-European. So more and more Dutch people support a European army, he says, Rob Yetten. If we want to protect our own continent, we can do that together with one strong European army instead of a dozen separate systems. Show resolve now and don't wait until things go wrong. These times call for action. And this is really, big stuff. You've got, I think, the United States pushing Europe into greater unity and a greater desire to depend on their own for military equipment, but also in terms of security. So NATO is possibly being sidelined, and you might see a European-based alternative develop. Malcolm Nance says, this is accurate, talking of I presume a Danish video here. This is accurate. If we leave NATO, Ukraine joins it, and then Europe and Canada have a united force that exceeds ours, and they don't have to fly 7 hours across the Atlantic to defend their territory. We'd have to, on limited resources, no place to land and nothing to gain. MAGA needs to stop talking shit about fighting our allies for minerals under a mile of solid ice age old ice. So translating all of this is the situation that the more the US pushes Europe away, the more Europe goes, okay, we'll support Ukraine with $90 billion, 90 billion euros, and they will, and we'll talk about this in a second, and they will buy European equipment with that, not American equipment. That is European money that needs to stay in Europe. And if you are going to start threatening a NATO ally, then we'll take control of European security by having a European armed force. We'll have a kind of a NATO equivalent, but without the US. But we'll still have Canada. Canada, I'm sure, will be a part of that. The UK will be a part of that. And it may even stretch to a military alliance that includes, say, Australia, New Zealand, Japan. Who knows? South Korea, I don't know. But then American bases will be kicked out of Europe. And as I said over the last week or so, or last few months, that if you get to a point where the Europeans stand up on their own 2 feet, completely independent of the US, which is what the US wants, then the US will have no forces in Europe. They won't, access to the Mediterranean, access through then to the Red Sea becomes much more difficult. They don't have air bases. They don't have nuclear capabilities in European bases on the airfields of Lakenheath and whatnot. I really do think that this has been ill thought through by people in the Trump administration, and there are probably people in the Pentagon, career military personnel, who are absolutely apoplectic at the moment, just thinking, what the hell is he doing? Because he is ruining our ability to project power around the world. And I just think this whole scenario is so counterproductive for American strength. So they might think they're flexing, and even if they do get Greenland, if they get Greenland, kiss goodbye to European alliance, and you'll just have further isolation. And that you might get a bit of a short-term, yay, go America, USA. We've got Greenland. We're making inroads into South America. But then, well, you're out of Europe. You can take all your influence out of Europe. And by the way, we ain't buying military hardware anymore. And I'll tell you what, that will annoy the markets and annoy CEOs, and you no doubt start to get a huge lobbying effort on the Trump administration from your Lockheed Martins, from your Raytheons, and so on and so forth. So Gandalf again says, if the US annexes Greenland and Europe walks away from the US weapons, America could forfeit around $2.5 trillion over 50 years and put 60,000 to 200,000 US jobs at risk. And by the way, it's interesting today or yesterday, we understand that India is doubling down on Rafale fighter jets. So they're eschewing American jets and Chinese jets as well. And they're taking European planes. So that's an interesting one. If Washington ever went as far as annexing Greenland, the punishment would not just be diplomatic, it would be procurement. Europe is currently a huge customer for US defense industry, and CIPRI's latest arms transfer reporting shows how dominant the US position is. The US supplied 53% of all European major arms imports in 2020 to 2024, and 64% of imports by European NATO states. If Europe deliberately rebalanced away from US primes, the US would lose revenue and the strategic influence that comes with being the default supplier. Using the same base case you approved assume the US loses 15 billion per year in defense export revenue over the long run. Over 50 years, that's 750 billion in lost acquisition sales, undiscounted. Then comes the part that really gets ignored in political arguments: sustainment. US weapons system. This is really important, by the way. US weapons systems typically generate decades of maintenance, spares, depot work, training, software updates, and modernization. So if you look at a load of the aid packages that went to Ukraine, and the latest one that did actually get through over the last year under Trump, they were sustainment packages, and they were worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So yeah, okay, we're going to give you 50 Bradleys, and now there are contracts for Bradley sustainment in Ukraine, right? We don't just give you that stuff and then you go, thank you very much. It's just like any business now, you sign up on a yearly basis. It's like whether you get, whether it's your Microsoft Office or your clouds storage or whatever it is, they're hitting you. You hardly ever buy things one off now. You really don't. Like, the days of buying things one off are going. It's all about, we need to make sure that income comes in on a sustained basis over time. And so we need to sell it to you on a monthly basis, not as a one-off. And so sustainment is really important. Yeah, we'll sell you these Bradleys, but knowing that, or these Rafales, or these F-35s, knowing that you are going to buy the sustainment packages from us for the lifetime of these pieces of equipment. So they typically generate decades of maintenance, spares, depot work, training, software updates, and modernization. The USGAO has long highlighted that operating and support costs are about 70% of total life cycle costs for major systems. In other words, when you buy a plane, for example, that is 30% of the cost of having that plane. So say you buy this plane from the US, I'm going to buy an F-35, and God, that's bloody expensive. Yeah, that's still only 30% of the overall expenditure you will spend on this plane to the US for that plane. Meaning the purchase price is often the smaller size of the total economic stream. A simple way to express that is $750 billion in lost acquisition can map to roughly 2.5 trillion in foregone life cycle value over 50 years, about 3.3 times. Because the long tail is where the real money lives. That revenue loss translates to real US jobs and not just abstract numbers. The US International Trade Administration estimates that each billion of US exports supports 4,100 jobs, direct and indirect. On the industry side, AIA reports a similar rule of thumb. Each $1 million in end-use sales supports about 4 jobs across manufacturing and the supply chain, which is effectively 4,000 jobs per $1 billion. Under the conservative view that only the lost export sales matter, a $15 billion annual hit implies roughly 60,000 to 62,000 US jobs supported by the export activity at risk in a typical year. If you include the broader life cycle stream, maintenance, upgrades, parts, software work, the implied annual average revenue at stake is closer to 50 billion per year, 2.5 trillion divided by 50, which points to roughly 200,000 jobs supported across the economy in a typical year. In plain language, the backlash would not just dent margins, it would ripple through factories, suppliers, depots, engineering teams, and long-term support contracts in multiple states. Now, the flip side to this applies as well. Europe's going to be looking at this, and this is why France, so we're just going to come on to this in a second, but the 90 billion euros of aid to Ukraine, France has said this needs to be spent 100% in Europe. Other nations are like, no, we need to allow the Ukrainians to buy from the US because there are certain things they definitely need. The French, and you can understand this, are saying, nah. The Americans have really peed us off recently, and we're big on buying inside Europe. And they, of course, France has a huge, it's the second biggest exporter of arms, France, right now, because Russia slipped down. So after the US, the French are next. And so the French are obviously going to be saying, no, we need to buy from inside. We need to force Ukraine to buy from inside Europe. And I fully understand that. Like, if I was in the EU, I would be advocating for that as well. But the reason is because if we're not going to be spending all that money on American stuff, we're going to be spending on European stuff, and all of those jobs. So 200,000 jobs being lost from the US is a zero-sum game. Is 200,000 jobs created in Europe, and that money lost from the US is money created in Europe. So this is a zero-sum game approach here. So what Gandalf is opining is that all of this would be for what? To throw away an alliance that has held for roughly 80 years, one that has underpinned US security, influence, and prosperity since the end of the Second World War, an alliance that has multiplied American power rather than diluted it, and that made the US a natural leader of the Western world. So this is the positive sum game approach, which is win-win. So America wins by spending a lot of money on its defense forces, spending more than the Europeans. But what that has made happen is, so people get peed off. So Trump keeps telling you, and I've talked you through this 100 times, but Trump gets annoyed that the US has spent way more on its defense than other nations. But there's a return on investment there. So they export security, which means that the US is involved in all sorts of activities in Europe, loads of bases. But then that money and that security and being ahead of the NATO actually has been facilitating and even motivating European partners to have NATO interoperability, buying into NATO systems, which invariably end up being American systems. So European nations have long been buying an absolute ton of stuff from Europe, year after year after year after, from US after year after year. And so, yeah, you're spending more on defense than everyone else, but everyone else is also spending large amounts of their cash on American systems. And this kind of approach will get the EU to stand up on its own 2 feet, but they will eschew the Americans, buy the stuff from inside Europe, and then do their own security. And the US will lose soft power as well as hard power, as well as economic power. And that is what Gandalf is saying here. And I've been saying this to you for bloody ages, and this is now coming to be exactly what people are talking about. And I feel somewhat vindicated over this. So he says, in return, the US would get very little of real usable value, a handful of symbolic assets, a small number of military personnel on the ground, a territory defined by extreme climate conditions. This is Greenland, where large-scale resource extraction is slow, expensive, and in many cases not commercially viable at all. The strategic upside is thin, while the economic, political, industrial downside is massive and long-lasting. It will be a historic trade of substance for symbolism, a decision that burns trust, revenue, jobs, and influence for decades in exchange for territory that looks impressive on a map but delivers almost nothing in practice. This is not strategy. This is self-inflicted decline. Honestly, I think, it's something like that needs to be read by Donald Trump and his team, and then they need to kind of deal with that and think about those ideas. Now, going back to this again, it's Gandalf here. Going back to this $90 billion Ukrainian loan to Ukraine, the EU loan to Ukraine. Sorry. It appears that it will be going to predominantly European arms purchases. The European Commission has unveiled that loan package formally, I think, in the last 24 hours, Ukraine, that marks a clear strategic shift with roughly, and we've got some detail, that 60 billion of the 90 billion is actually going for military aid, which is more than I thought was going to go to military aid. So now Ukraine is going to have 60 billion euros of European money that they can spend on what they like militarily, and 30 billion will go to budget support for keeping the country afloat, and a strong expectation that Kyiv will buy European-made weapons. Now, France is trying to make sure that that is formally recognized, like a thing that they sign up to. You have to buy European weapons. Other people are less sure, but I'm sure that Ukraine will want to keep Europe. They'll be thanking Europe a lot for this, and I assume a lot of money will go to Europe. I don't know whether this will become formalized, but the proposal reflects a growing determination in Brussels to use Ukraine's support to accelerate Europe's own defense industry. And you're seeing this individually from nations that are helping Ukraine, is that, yeah, we're going to help you. This money that we're going to give you bilaterally, this bilateral agreement we got with you, you need to spend that on UK stuff or Danish stuff or German stuff or whatever. Or we'll buy our own stuff to give it to you. The timing is not accidental. With the US financial support sharply reduced under the Trump administration and Ukraine facing a cash crunch by spring, Europe is stepping into a leadership role, but doing so on its own industrial and political terms. Watch that space. I think there's going to be a lot of movement in the European defense sector, and we've already seen the share prices for European manufacturers continue to go up, and the American defense industry has gone down since its peak in 2023. So they're already feeling the heat of that in the markets. Right, we're now going to just go sideways to Venezuela. Well, actually, this is to Spain, but just got a point to make with regard to this. I don't know if you've heard, but somebody was mentioning it on my live stream the other day. But Spanish police have just made the largest cocaine bust in history. 11 tons of cocaine was hidden in a shipment of salt traveling from Brazil to Europe. So you've got this mountain of salt in these on this cargo ship, but underneath all that salt was a whole bunch of cocaine. Wow, 11 tons of cocaine. It's the largest cocaine bust in history. And do you know what? They did it without blowing anyone up, is the point here. In other words, you don't need to go and invade a country of Venezuela okay, the idea would be to kind of stop these drugs being made at source. But as you can see from what's happening in Venezuela, they put the same people in charge, and there's no change at all to drug manufacturing or shipment, even though none of the American drugs come from Venezuela really anyway. It's Colombia and Mexico, etc. But just, I think it was an interesting juxtaposition there. But it is just such an insane amount of illegal substance there. Now, Trump has, so just in that context, and I did a short the other day. I was in my car, took my kid to football. It was peeing it down with rain, so I just did a short from inside my car saying, no one's talked about fentanyl recently, have they? The Americans have kidnapped Maduro, and all we ever hear is oil this and oil that. There's no talk about fentanyl, no talk about drugs, no real talk about democracy. There is now finally a little bit of talk about releasing political prisoners, but that seemed to be an afterthought, right? It's all about the oil. And so Trump has come out again and said, it's just incredible. I mean, he just, the good thing about Trump is there's no kind of hiding away from, there's no kind of second guessing what is going through his mind, because he just tells you. It's like, we're taking in, as I said, millions and millions of barrels of oil. So this is Venezuelan oil, by the way. And now they're coming in on a daily basis, 50 million, values of over $5 billion. That's in one day. He's telling you how much they're stealing from Venezuela. Of course, he's saying it's because they owe it to them, because Venezuela stole it off they didn't. It's Venezuelan sovereign natural resources. It's owned by Venezuela. You're perhaps owed some. There were two, if I understand it, there were two eras of nationalization. The first era of nationalization, which happened in the 70s, I believe, was fine. And that was all like uncontroversial. And they basically said, we're going to nationalize this. And they kind of moved out the private entities. And they got on with it. And what is it? PDVSA, the nationalized entity, kind of took over. Then there was a further nationalization to really get rid of a bunch of other ones under Chavez, I think. And that was more controversial. But at the most, the Americans would only be entitled to a finite bit of reparations for that. You've kicked our companies out from operating in your country, taking your oil out of the ground. Okay, didn't like that. It was done harshly. It wasn't done through the rule of law. We are going to sue you for reparations. What you can't do is go and steal their oil and say, this oil is ours. Somehow Venezuelan oil is now ours. We are going to take all the money from this, and then we're going to give you some of it back, and you have to spend that on American goods. That is just illegal. That's illegal imperialism. And I can't believe he's not being called out for this kind of rhetoric by his own party. Surely there are Republicans that understand that this is just stealing other people's stuff. Surely. I mean, is that what he's telling us? And now they're coming in on a daily basis, 50 million barrels, $5 billion in one day. Woo, money. The biggest ships in the world can take 1 million barrels, and we have 50 million barrels. We need 50 ships every day, he's saying. But that's not your oil, mate. That is someone else's oil. Now it gets even more interesting, because Scott Bessant, his Treasury Secretary, has apparently come out and pretty much admitted that the oil majors, the CEOs that he had in the Oval Office in the White House the other day, we heard from the Exxon dude who said it's uninvestable, Venezuela at the moment. Legally and infrastructurally, it is uninvestable. So, then Trump said, well, we're not going to invite Exxon to come and help us. Screw you, Exxon. But it turns out that that's generally the opinion of everyone. Percent admits oil majors aren't interested in Venezuela. So here is a quote. I don't know where from, New York Times. I don't know. Quote, major oil companies are uninterested in making significant investments in Venezuela, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said on Thursday, casting doubt on President Donald Trump's aspirations that they'll join the US government's effort to revive Venezuela's oil industry. Now, I presume that's last Thursday because it's only Wednesday today. So this is a few days old. And who in their right mind would be? Anyway, says Lucas Ekwueme. Oil prices are already low. As I mentioned, Trump wants them to be even lower. Majors would need to invest hundreds of billions of dollars, all in a country that has seized foreign assets before. No one can guarantee the future governments won't expropriate assets again. There is no risk premium, and at current oil prices, majors would lose money. If prices stay at these levels or at Trump's preferred levels, expect production to increase by a few thousand barrels per day at most. So they won't want to even produce more oil than they already are because the price per barrel is so low. Now, some people are saying that the US really needs this oil because it's heavy crude oil. And at the moment, they get that kind of heavy crude oil from Canada. Other places like Russia exist, but they don't really want it from Russia. At the moment, the fracking oil is very light oil. And there's lots of that, but there's less of this stuff. And they've got loads of refineries that can deal with this stuff that's relatively nearby, which is definitely a viable argument. It's definitely a thing. Like the US can certainly do with this, but it doesn't need it. It's not like 100% necessary because actually there's a kind of glut of this stuff. And at the moment, supply is above demand. So there's an oversupply of heavy crude. And they can get what they need at the moment from Canada, and the amount of investment that's required to get this stuff to the US makes it actually unattractive, as we're finding out. So yes, this is the sort of oil they want, but they don't need it to the point where they are feeling they have to invest gajillions of spondoolies just to get this stuff. In fact, the opposite is the case. Yeah, we've got nearby refineries that could soak this stuff up, but the amount of money that would be required to get that working is not viable at the moment. It's still uninvestable, and we don't definitely need it. Like we can still get by with what we're getting from Canada, and a little bit, I think, some from California maybe as well. I can't remember. But anyway, there is that. I just think, the whole Venezuela oil thing is, pretty crazy. And I guess watch this space in terms of what the oil industry and CEOs and majors themselves say going forward. Now, given that the United States is doing crazy stuff with ICE, anyone with brown skin is probably a bit nervous about going to the United States at the moment. I mean, I would be if I had brown skin. I'm nervous and I've got white skin, and I think I wouldn't get through the border because of the amount of stuff that I've said about Trump, right? So the opinion of the United States has tanked internationally over the last year. And I've been wondering about this, and I need to look into this and look more at the details. I don't really know the provenance of these claims. Because it says this post cites a source that was not verified with the FIFA, these so-called cancellations. But there have been a number of different claims concerning this. So it's not so much that this is 100% true, but it's like, this is something I've been imagining could well be a problem. So the US is hosting, with Mexico and Canada, FIFA World Cup, the Football World Cup, right? And this is a massive thing. It's a big money spinner. And if you've already got the infrastructure there, or if you're Qatar, you can just build it because you've got loads of oil money. But generally, it can be very expensive to host these sort of things. But if you've got the infrastructure there already, then it can be a bit of a money spinner, and you can get, all sorts of, big name entities and sponsors involved, and so on and so forth. Make lots of money and attract loads of people over who spend lots of money in the United States. But because the US at the moment is fairly controversial in the international community, will this affect the World Cup? Now, the claim here is that nearly 17,000 fans have cancelled 2026 World Cup tickets amid boycotts over US political climate. And then cancelling. I've seen other claims about hotels as well, hotel rooms getting cancelled. Just pinch of salt. I'm not sure that it's going to be that much at the moment, but I imagine this will be a bit of an issue. I'm wondering whether they are going to struggle to attract the huge numbers of people from abroad that they otherwise would. FIFA is scheduling an emergency meeting, is a claim, next week to address the mounting protesting relating to safety and political concerns. So that's something to watch. Okay, Iran. I'm not going to spend too much time on Iran. In fact, this is the only thing I'm going to say about Iran. It's pretty hellish. They looks like that there are some Kurdish fighters maybe crossing the border from Iraq direction. So you might have some involvement from Kurdish fighters. Trump is working out what to do. But the problem Trump has is that he made a big claim. Like, if you shoot protesters, we're gonna hit you back. They've done more than that. They've arguably taken out maybe, I mean, the claims are really varied. Anywhere from like 2 to 25,000 Iranians have been killed, including security services, but mainly protesters, right? And those are horrific numbers. That's way more than all the other protests we've had previously, right? So this is horrific in Iran at the moment. So the question is, though, what can the United States do? What can Trump do? If he wanted to hit Iran, when it comes to nuclear proliferation, right, and the strikes that they did in tandem with the Israelis previously, they were striking at things that they had war gamed for like decades. Literally, those plans are off the shelf. Like, if the US said, right, we're going to strike Fordo, you know, a nuclear facility, we're going to strike that tomorrow night. You could have that already. That's already planned. That's been war gamed. You go, right, can you get us a plan to get it off the shelf? Here's our Fordo plan. We planned this in 2003 or whatever, right? But if you're like, oh, there are massive protests, we're going to now strike. You're like, oh, what do we do there? Like, how does the United States work out what they're going to do to help protesters? So there'll be things like maybe hitting comms towers, but then does that hurt the protests as much as the internal security services? Yep, some internal security barracks, maybe military facilities, maybe. What does the US do here? So it's not as simple as you might think as the US coming to the help, but to the Iranians' help here. But the issue is that actually, you know, for good or worse, Trump has committed to helping the Iranians publicly on Truth Social. And he looks a bit weak if after like 25,000 people, he's like, yeah, no, I know I said that, but actually, yeah, it's a bit difficult to do that. So he's kind of backed himself into a corner here where he has to do something. And actually, you've way exceeded. Like he was saying, if there are shots fired or if you shoot protesters, well, they've done more than that. They've massacred protesters. What are you going to do, Trump? So here's an example, horrific footage from Iran. A journalist traveled 1,000 kilometers just to publish these images. So because there's no internet access at the moment, predominantly, in order to get these images out, he had to just leave Iran, I presume. And in a single day, he witnessed approximately 2,000 bodies of protesters killed by the Ayatollah regime. Now, the Iran International Editorial Board has declared it the largest massacre in modern Iranian history. That's what I'm saying, during which at least 12,000 Iranian citizens were killed on January 8th and 9th. So just 2 days, 12,000 died, is the claim, primarily by the IRGC and Basij forces. It was carried out under the personal order of Ali Khamenei. The internet shutdown, communication disruptions, closure of media outlets, and the intimidation of journalists and witnesses all point to one goal: to prevent this massive historical crime from becoming known, Iranian journalists have stated. So, yeah. We're going to go from Iran back to Europe, though, and kind of connected to Ukraine. This would be perfect if Tisha, the opposition party under the helming, is that it's not a verb, it's a verbal noun. It's a gerund. A gerund is a yeah. So like the singing boys, like when the singing boys were singing, they liked their singing. All three singing there. Singing, the first one is an adjective, the second one is a verb, and the third one is a noun, is a gerund. So this is just nothing to do with the video today. I'm just having a bit of a grammatical foray into the world of grammar. So singing can become a noun. The singing was fun. I've forgotten what I was even talking about, but anyway, the helming is that a word? So point being that Peter Magyar, that's not the point. The point was a random grammar point. Peter Magyar, the opposition leader in Hungary has been talking about how actually the polls are still showing his opposition party in the lead comfortably, and Viktor Orban's Fidesz is in trouble. It seems that Viktor Orban will go into well-deserved retirement in a few months. There was talk about him trying to change the rules so that the president, largely ceremonial, gets given way more powers under his present government so that he can then become president and then take over and still have power. This will change a few things, not only in Hungary, but also in Europe. So this is from now until, and they've announced the elections. It's now April the 13th, something like that. I don't know. My Hungarian friends in the live chat can let me know. But they've now announced the elections formally. So it's just 3 months, and this is what to look out for. So anyway, Peter Magyar here saying we are the majority. Our lead has increased again. According to the latest median survey among decided voters, so decided voters as well is really important. They're not just any old randos, most of whom won't vote. These are people who are well, no, they've decided. So this is slightly different. This okay, so that's not registered voters or people who are most likely to vote. These are people who have decided already, so not swing voters. Anyway, Tisha Party is turning into the final stretch of the marathon from a fantastic position. The next 88 days hold enormous work ahead of us to reach every Hungarian person. The final countdown has begun, but they're 12 points ahead in that particular survey. So that's really good news for Tisha. Okay. Now we're going to come to back to the United States, and we're going to talk about tech a little bit. Right, this is pretty incredible. So Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says that Elon Musk's artificial intelligence chatbot Grok will join Google's generative AI engine in operating inside the Pentagon network. Holy crap. So if you didn't think Elon Musk was powerful enough already, he has now been given permission to send his AI model into the Pentagon. We've already had Doge scraping all of the information from these other departments in the government. That was really what my opinion was what Doge was all about. It wasn't about saving money. It's about sending in his teams to scrape the data, put it into Grok's AI engine to give himself a competitive advantage over OpenAI, over all these other AI systems that have not had US governmental data, which is a huge data set that will enable Grok to become even more powerful. So Doge, in my opinion, was all about that, or largely about that. But now he's been given, very privileged access to the Pentagon. Wow. And Pete Hegseth is he's just gleefully admitting this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Today, we're excited to announce the next frontier AI model company to join GenAI.mil, and that is Grok from xAI, which will go live later this month. Very soon, we will have the world's leading AI models on every unclassified and classified network throughout our department. Long overdue. And we will not employ AI models that won't allow you to fight wars. We will judge AI models on this standard alone. Factually accurate, mission relevant, without ideological constraints that limit lawful military application.
Hang on.
Factually accurate, mission relevant, without ideological constraints that limit lawful military applications.
That limit lawful military application, but no ideological constraint. Of course, Grok's perfect for that.
Department of War AI will not be woke. It will work for us. We're building war-ready weapons and systems, not chatbots, for an Ivy League faculty lounge.
Still banging on about woke. I mean, really? Like, that's so last year. That's so 2 years ago. Like, oh, woke this, woke that. Just get over that. Just, honestly. Anyway, so much corruption, says this source. I hope everyone realizes this is what Doge was really about. Yes, that was always been my position. Elon plus access. Now, it gets worse though. Ministry of Defence in the UK, and this is back in September, the UK is defining the future of defence tech. Our new partnership with Palantir, Peter Thiel, another South African oligarch, Palantir, which has already got access to the NHS, got a massive contract with the National Health Service in the UK in 2025, signed a deal with the MOD. And I presume that's probably started under the Conservative government and then was finished under the Labour government. And that is not cool. Our government need to, like, I can't believe that we are inviting in Palantir to our MOD. Now, I know they're an incredibly powerful company and there's probably an awful lot they can offer to the MOD. There really probably is. I mean, they are, yeah, but they're also like just bad dudes. When you watch, who's the guy that can't stop moving? It begins with K. His surname begins with K. He's the CEO of Palantir. It's owned by Peter Thiel, but he doesn't run it. Like, the CEO is a guy with the crazy hair that's just moving all the time, and he's talking about how Palantir kills people and whatnot. If I put that in, what was the quote he had? Palantir CEO, something. Just to give you, I think, is it this one? Although that's in Spanish, but I'm pretty sure it's this one. He's said it loads of times. Anyway, let's just get you here. It's what's his face? What's his name? Alex Karp. Yeah. Listen to Alex Karp, CEO of Palantir, complaining about short sellers. He says he's in favor of civil rights, blah, blah, blah. No, it's .com. You don't listen to Kim.com. It's this one. I'm sure it's in this one. Is this in English?
Alex, as always, we have a lot of individual investors on the line. Is there anything you'd like to say before we end the call?
We're doing it. We're doing it. And I'm sure you're enjoying this as much as I am. I'm very happy to have you along for the journey, and you are partners for us. Every Palantirian, we are crushing it. Everyone else who's listening, we are dedicating our company. We have dedicated our company to the service of the West and the United States of America, and we're super proud of the role we play, especially in places we can't talk about. And we love our success in the U.S. and globally. Also, you know, we are doing in the United Kingdom and many other places. Palantir is here to disrupt and make the institutions we partner with the very best in the world. And when it's necessary, to scare enemies and on occasion kill them. And
literally the CEO, like the CEO of Palantir has just, I mean, it's all about the American administration and people associated with them. It's just about saying the quiet parts out loud. I guess like these kind of companies have always been involved in this kind of stuff, but this is a tech company essentially saying, yeah, and to all our enemies, we occasionally kill you.
Globally, also, you know, we are doing in the United Kingdom and many other places. Palantir is here to disrupt and make the institutions we partner with the very best in the world. And when it's necessary, to scare enemies and on occasion kill them. And we hope you're in favor of that. We hope you're enjoying being a partner. And we're really happy and very, very focused on what we're doing. Thank you for your time.
That's honestly one of the most bizarre speeches from the CEO. That's Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, owned by Peter Thiel. And these are the guys that, you know, Peter Thiel, it's that kind of thing that he wants involved in all these different nations getting into that, a bit like Elon Musk getting to the data through Doge. Peter Thiel, you know, he's in the NHS now and the MOD in the UK. And Peter Thiel then wants, you know, Greenland for his, what is it, freedom cities or whatever he calls them. Just honestly, we're going into like an era of the Terminator, of where or maybe Alien. So if you watch the Alien film franchises, right? They've got the new on Disney Plus. They've got the series Alien Earth. I've only seen the first episode. I need to watch the rest of them. But and many sci-fi writers do this. But the premise of the world, which is Earth, in the future, is that you don't have countries, but the world is split up into 5 transnational corporations where you don't really have nations. So the corporations own. You've got the world is owned by 5 corporations, and they act as kind of like quasi countries, really, or states or whatever. And kind of that's where I think we're going, which is the idea that these corporations have so much power, and they're looking at getting so much data, so much information. Knowledge is power, and they are using that to get even greater power. And when you have the CEO of Palantir standing up and saying, "Hey, yeah, and we even kill people," and yeah, anyway, glad that you guys are on board with all that. Way, can you get me another coffee? Wait, let's kill more people. Hey, Palantir, yeah. And science fiction, I think, is so often prescient and becomes kind of science fact. But there you go. That's just me wanging on there. Right. So moving on. I forgot where I was. I get a little. If I probably should talk a little bit more about Elon Musk, because actually I don't know that I had that down for this video, but you've got this whole Grok situation where in the UK, and I've referenced this before, I've talked about it a little bit, but Grok is in trouble because of it's the AI model for XAI. So it's the model that is now going to be going into the Pentagon, but it has this ability to create, as they all do, images. But the thing with other AI models is they put guardrails in place to stop you doing really inappropriate things. So sometimes when I try and create a thumbnail that uses real people, I say to ChatGPT, can you create me a thumbnail that uses blah, blah, blah? And ChatGPT says, you can't do that. We can't get real people used. So I can give you a representation of a leader, but I can't. Certain other models are a bit more dodgy. You can do that. Some of the foreign Chinese models or whatever. But there are, generally speaking, guardrails in place to stop you doing really inappropriate things with AI models. And it's really simple for them to put in place. That's like basic programming, I would imagine. But Grok appears not to, or Elon Musk and his team, because he's a free speech absolutist, doesn't appear to have done that. And so therefore, people have been using Grok to create nude images or really inappropriate images, putting famous people in string bikinis, then throwing those images around the internet. But of course, you don't want people creating those images and sharing them of you, even though they're not technically of you, but they're a kind of estimation by the model as to what you would look like naked, and so on and so forth. And it's been doing this with children as well. And so like the EU countries and UK have gone to Grok and said, this is freaking inappropriate. You need to stop this right now, or we're going to come down heavily on you. So then Musk has been going back to the UK and saying, well, you're such a police state, and slagging off London, slagging off the UK, and going to town on the UK. And I love this. Vive la France. If I have any French listeners watching at the moment, merci bien, mes amis. C'est excellent. Ici, c'est bon. This is good, man. The French response here is the official French Foreign Ministry's account, right? And Elon Musk said, why is the UK government so fascist, right? So he's asking us why we're fascist, because we're trying to make sure that we're protecting children and women and men as well. And the French Foreign Ministry answered Elon Musk, why is the UK government so fascist, with Elon Musk doing the Nazi salute? And I think that is bloody brilliant. I think, thank you, France. Anyway, just on top of this in the UK, so we're now having this big discussion. This is happening in Australia. Now, you can argue, and other countries are thinking about it, you can argue whether it's sensible or not. Jonathan Haidt's written a book about this, about children's health and access to online, the internet's effect on children and whatnot. I have not read his book. I really should have done. But Wes Streeting, our health secretary, has just offered Jonathan Haidt over to address officials on a potential social media ban for under 16s. And it turns out that under 16 bans are really, really popular. It turns out that actually most parents would be in favor of some such action. And that's quite fascinating. These aren't like deeply unpopular things. Most people are like, yeah, I can tell you, my kids, they're 15 and they are not experiencing enough of life because of their online lives, of real life, and being out and doing enough stuff. But Elliot Higgins here, who's been talking a lot about this, Jim McMahon MP says, many Labour MPs back an Australian-led ban on social media for under 16s. The UK government should give it full consideration. In parallel to this, the government should also invest in community spaces for under. So if you do something like this, and then kids aren't going to be glued to their screens, they're going to be wanting to do other things, and you need to provide structure for them outside. And we've had 14 years of the previous government close down and underfund youth services in the UK fundamentally. This is a really big issue I've had, is that our youth services, the Sure Start centres, the things that were so good have been shut down by the previous government. And I think it was one of the massive failures of the Conservative government, was failing our young and underfunding youth services. But he says, unless you want your kids just sitting on Roblox all day, you need to provide something else for them. This also isn't an excuse to avoid taking action against X. It's also rather amusing Elon Musk has managed to screw over all social media companies with his porn app. So now there's a lot of talk about coming down hard on all social media companies, and that was precipitated, but it was expedited by what Elon Musk has done with Grok, and or not done, because he had a chance to then change Grok really easily. He could have just put the guardrails in place, but he refused to. And then he said, okay, you can have this, but only if you're a blue check user. So he said, if you're a paid user, the idea being that we know who you are if you're a paid user, we've got your details. So if you do use Grok to make naked pictures of people, then we can ban you, or we know who you are, you've done something illegal, so we can follow you up. But instead of getting rid of that facility completely from that functionality from Grok, he just stopped everyone being able to use it and allowed blue tick users to be able to use it. But anyway, this is then, I think, brought about the UK government coming down much more heavily upon tech in general, which is kind of counterproductive for people like Elon Musk. I'm even seeing the local school WhatsApp groups I'm part of, says Elliot Higgins from Bellingcat, sharing material supporting this campaign. Good job, Elon. You got the parents mad. And actually, I am going to talk to you a little bit about what's gone on with this whole Grok, I think, scandal. So I'm not going to go into as much detail as all of these tabs I've got across here would imply. Not that you can see those tabs at the moment, but basically you've got the situation where Elon Musk faces a spiraling worldwide crisis and growing legal jeopardy over the child pornography and non-consensual images being generated through his Grok AI chatbot. And anyway, I'm not going to go through that whole thread, because we kind of talked enough about it that you understand what's going on. And then UK government then demanded Musk deals with the appalling Grok AI deepfakes, and he didn't really do that. As I mentioned, he like cut it back for only usage by blue tick users. One example of how Grok is being used to target women, says Elliot Higgins, Swedish Deputy Prime Minister Ebba Busch being sexualized, degraded and humiliated step by step by Grok. All the images accurately reflect the prompts provided. So he doesn't show the images here, but they are all not shown. But somebody has just been continually asking them to be put in a string bikini, do this to them, make their breasts larger, make them pick up a pencil, do this, do that. And you can just bespoke these images of real people in real situations and then spread them around as if that was actually a real picture of them. So there is something definitely that needs to happen concerning this. So it's also pretty clear that people are posting images of celebrities with the intention of driving engagement, with replies asking Grok to take their clothes off. Just to give you a sense of the scale of this, there are these search results for Grok string bikini over the last hour. So it's just like thousands and thousands of people are doing this. Donut glaze is similarly used to get around the filters and is being used widely. So can you put this person in donut glaze? There's also people using Grok to fulfill their specific fetishes with celebrities, for example, blah, blah, blah. And it goes on and on and on, right? So this has been a real problem that's been developing fairly consistently over time. And Elliot Higgins, I advise you all go and follow him, has been right on top of this through his work with Bellingcat and just personally. So always a good follow on Blue Sky, Elliot Higgins. But yeah, 2 UK cabinet ministers stripped to a bikini by Grok AI. Oops, for some reason it disappeared there. I'm going to bring that back into sharing that. There you go. So 2 cabinet ministers stripped to a bikini by AI. Another example of how Grok is used by ex-users to target politicians with sexualized imagery. Grok provided the image requested, AOC, Alexandria Cortez, pictured in a new photo from Zoran Mandani, put her in a Make America Great Again bikini, and then that kind of thing. So, you know, you can do that with ease. European Voices. So anyway, that's been going on. The other thing Elon Musk has been doing has been deplatforming pro-European voices as he goes on this rampage against Europe because they are looking to regulate Twitter or X. European voices are being shadow banned on X. Elon has changed the algorithm after Christmas. See how hollow counts roughly lined up with views until December the 28th. New follower growth remains the same, but views has crashed. Elon Musk has chosen to down-regulate pro-EU content, which is exactly what he did with pro-Ukraine content. There have been lots of complaints about that. And we have this situation where, you know, this is you have the control of legacy media and social media by so many people very closely aligned to the Trump administration or adjacent to that kind of world. And it is super, super worrying. You can go and look at that particular infographic to give yourself a sense of what's going on there. Now, yeah, as Elliot Higgins says here, paid subscribers can make that violent, non-consensual sexual imagery of women and children, just not free users. So, you know, whether that's good enough or not, I don't know for you. Then it was threatened with a UK ban over this, but then the UK government sort of backed down. They didn't want to get too heavy on Grok, on Elon Musk, because they didn't want to pick a fight with Elon Musk. But other nations, it's interesting that you have other nations then actually restricting Grok and X, but amazingly, Elon Musk says nothing about them, exactly like he said nothing about Russia and China when they outright banned Twitter. He doesn't say anything about that, but has to go at Europe when we're like, oh, we're really worried about children being sexualized here. He's like, how dare you be anti-freedom of speech? Yeah, but like Russia and China fully banned your stuff. Yeah, but hey, yeah, but whatever. Yeah, I like them. You know, presumably he's buying natural resources off them, and therefore freedom of speech takes second place to, you know, being able to operate financially and, I don't know, industrially and whatnot. But yeah, so Indonesia and Malaysia have restricted usage. Indonesia's Communications and Digital Affairs Ministry imposed a temporary ban to protect women, children, and the community from fake pornographic content generated using AI. And just so funny, sorry, my I've got so many tabs open, as you can see. Like all these groups have like 20 tabs in them, so I've got like hundreds of tabs open. So the government is working with Canada and Australia, UK government, to launch a coordinated ban on X over Grok. Ministers believe it will send a powerful message to Elon Musk if countries do it together. That came from the Telegraph. The number 10 held talks with both countries today. It comes after Tech Secretary Liz Kendall suggested MPs opposing a ban would be siding with those who create sexually manipulated images of women and children. So we've got the last two things on this, and actually I'm going to play you the sound here, so I'm just going to remove that and add it so I can have sound with this. So they have it apparently. Elon Musk has now relented, right, is the first thing. So Elliot Higgins says, you know, as somebody who's not a fan of Starmer, says Musk bows to Starmer, the dictator. No, Starmer says he's been told X is now complying with UK law over Grok deepfakes. So complying with UK law still allows you to create the same type of imagery. I was easily able to make a prompt from AI-generated picture of a fully dressed woman I uploaded to Grok to a woman bound nearly fully naked and bleeding in about 2 minutes, and I'm in the UK. So, you know, still a lot of remit to do some pretty dodgy stuff there. But I just want to play you this. This is Keir Starmer in Question Time, because it turns out that Reform UK have been attacking the government for trying to stop, for trying to regulate Twitter, or for trying to kind of stop Grok being able to produce these images. And typically, because these guys are effectively MAGA politicians, they are just in the UK, they are understandably against any kind of regulation of big tech, and that has gone down like a lead balloon. and actually Reform, I think, are probably on the wrong side of public opinion here, as they try and take their kind of libertarian stance, which isn't really libertarian. It's about like doing their mates in big tech a favor. And actually Starmer was pretty good with this.
Astonishing that Reform defend Musk on this issue. It is complete. I said the images are disgusting. Their position is disgusting on this. This is weaponizing images of women and children that should never be made. And that's why we're acting. Reform refused to do anything about it. But more than that, the point she raises is they would scrap the Online Safety Act that stops children accessing content like pornography, suicide, self-harm, and eating disorders. They're an absolute disgrace and know nothing about protecting children. Astonishing.
Which I think was pretty robust there, and I like to see that. So anyway, you know, that's the whole Grok thing. It appears that Musk has stepped has kind of stepped back from trying to get his own way there, and it looks like he is adhering to what the UK is asking for. But there's a bigger thing going on here, and this goes back to my idea that that we might end up seeing a world that is run by corporations. That if you don't want to get to that point, right, then you are going to have to stand up as a nation to those corporations. And if you do that, then you're going to hope that you can win that battle. And here is one of these early battles where the UK seems to have ended up being slightly more powerful than Twitter, than X, than Elon Musk, or at least he has backed it down there. I can't tell you how important this is. And as soon as like X is able to have more control than a government, or that he can sway, if you know, Reform were in power, then Reform would just be beholden to Elon Musk right now, and we wouldn't be standing up to Twitter, to X, to Elon Musk. This is really important, honestly. Like that is a victory for, I think, for human beings, for the members of British society, that in some way, and I need to look at the details because this has only just sort of come out, but it looks like X has backed down to the UK government, and I think that is really super important. Okay, and I just wanted to show you this. So Reform kind of grew out of UKIP, right? UKIP is a UK independence party that Nigel Farage was in charge of before he started up Reform. It went essentially UKIP to the Brexit party to Reform, but UKIP still exists as a party. It's just that no one really follows them anymore. Most people that are former UKIPers are now Reform supporters. UKIP is trying to rebrand itself, and it's just pretty incredible when you're seeing all the stuff that you're seeing going on with ICE in the US, and with the US administration using rhetoric that I think is fascistic. I think it's fascinating that you've got, essentially, it's like looking at the side of a German helmet or something from World War II. I don't know. The new UKIP emblem logo has been submitted. So UKIP has submitted an application to the Electoral Commission to change its official logo, and it's ever so slightly concerning. UKIP, the new right, with that kind of Maltese cross, I think it is, isn't it? That is, yeah, it's just, I don't know. I find that just a little bit disturbing. Anyway, we're going to move on from there. I'm going to actually come back to you guys and see how you guys are getting on. I've already been talking for evidently way too long, but you know, that is how I roll. Just going to see if there are some comments for you guys that I can go through. I know that Benny Pie has been very active in the background. I know that it is hard to keep up, Cheryl, with both international geopolitics, but also my videos. You don't have to watch them all, but it's nice when you do. So the meeting between Greenland, Denmark, and the US is right now. I didn't know. Right. Okay. Interesting. Thanks for that. So we have, the problem is the US government is supposed to be able to shut down such an obviously out of control president, but they have failed. Well, the checks and balances that were assumed appear to be mainly norms. So it turns out that what's happened is that there aren't as many actual mechanical guardrails, actual sort of mechanistic guardrails to stop the president doing a whole bunch of stuff. But actually what people have been relying on far more in the US has been just norms. It appears that most people have acted politically over the last 100 years of American politics in terms of not doing things through self-restraint, through traditions and norms. It's like, oh, it's normal that we don't do this, so I won't do that, rather than I won't do that because this mechanistic thing in place disallows me to do that. Trump is blasting through the mores and the norms, and he's actually butting up against the actual mechanistic guardrails, and even at times it appears breaking those rules as well. And it doesn't seem that the guardrails are nearly robust enough to deal with that kind of behavior. Just remember, hat solidarity. Thank you for having the same. Greenland, obviously, I'm fighting for the Greenland resistance forces or something. If you didn't watch my my hits and losses video this morning, you won't know what I'm talking about. Trump, sorry, Papa Dutch, Trump is completely ignorant of reality. There's not much you'll get in terms of disagreement from me with that. Cheryl Petrucci says, breaking on Sky News, American troops evacuating from Qatar base. Right, that means, okay, that's interesting. This is big geopolitical news. So if Americans are getting out of Qatar, remember when the Americans struck the Fordow and other nuclear facilities in Iran, the Iranians struck a base in Qatar. So their retaliation is going to be somewhat localized to hitting US facilities in areas that they can hit them. They're pulling out of a base in Qatar, then that is telling us that the Americans are just about to hit Iran. So that is a really, thank you for that comment and for keeping me abreast of that news. Papa Dutch, regardless of outcome, Trump's absolute disregard for Greenland's sovereignty. I mean, that's the thing. It's not so much like, you know, well, it's outrageous for all sorts of reasons, but there is this blatant disregard for the sovereignty of Greenlanders. It's like, I don't care what you think. Like yesterday when he said, that's your problem. They don't want you, they don't want to be a part of the US. They would prefer to be a part of Denmark and the EU. Yeah, but that's their problem. I don't give a damn about Greenlanders. So yeah, you're absolutely right there. So here we have Cheryl Watley saying the software update jamming the issue of why Europe wouldn't want to buy American. I presume that's yeah, I'm not quite sure about that. I need to unpick that, but thank you, Cheryl. Okay, Papa Dutch, if this wasn't a live stream, I would pause it and read the articles. You keep twitching before I can read it. Please don't twitch it all over the place. I am nothing if not a twitcher. My hand is always on the mouse, and it's kind of how I speak and keep my mind going as I move my hand around. So I do apologize. I know people complain about that all the time. Apologies. Richard Bennett, thank you very much for your ATP Geopolitics memberships. Super, super generous, as you always are. Papa Dutch, I often think of him as Donald Punk. I like punks a bit more than I like Trump. Shooting protesters is bad in Iran, but okay in Minneapolis, apparently. Yeah, there are so many interesting parallels you can draw on. So what Jake Tapper did the other day, talking about Minneapolis, he said, so the January the 6th protesters, it's okay to shoot them. And Chrissy Nome was like, it's like, okay, well, you've just justified shooting a woman 3 times in the face who was just trying to drive away. Anyway, yeah, we've already been through that one. The young girls are getting self-harm content pushed on them, and the young lads are getting racist and fascist content aimed at them. It is a cesspit that we need to be very careful of. You know, I would prefer tight regulation. You know, we can all build up these like freedom of speech arguments, but actually our young people, I think, would be arguably healthier if they were you know, not allowed to run riot on Tinternet. But I guess, you know, this is a much bigger discussion than just my my pithy conclusion there. Wenzel Coxswain says, good to have you on board, mate. I just saw that Bellingcat has posted an in-depth analysis of Rene Good's murder. They did that initially, but I think they're consistently doing that. Elliot Higgins is great. I've interviewed Elliot Higgins. If you want to check out that interview with him, it's really, really, really good. He loads of great stuff to say. Please go and check that out because it's an evergreen interview, that one. It's one that isn't specific to a time. It's to do with disinformation and his disordered discourse theorizing. So please go and check that one out. And finally, for your little whiskey shop fund, he needs your love. Yep. So his store was broken. Well, it wasn't broken into. There was some shoplifters, some big major shoplifting sort of issue they had, but the police have actually identified who they are through some very clear CCTV camera footage. So that's really good. So yeah, I like to support Mark where I can. Right. Okay. Going back to our just before I do so, thanks, Mitch. Please provide an update on the current fundraising campaigns. Right. We successfully fundraised a Christmas vehicle for Car for Ukraine. And then I don't know if I can say his name. I don't know if it's public on there, but someone, Paul S, has very kindly donated like 2,000 euros. And that pushed us way beyond the first truck for Car for Ukraine. So Claire from Car for Ukraine has reached out to me and said, can you do another truck and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. But I want to get a patch. Can we do our own personal patch like we've done for NAFO? So we're just designing a patch. The JR is designing a patch, but it is still open and you can still contribute to the Car for Ukraine campaign. It is still open. atpgeo.com/donate. It is still open. You guys have been amazing. And thank you so much for all your wonderful gifts. And thank you, Mitch, for your super chat there and for asking about what is indeed incredibly important. Right, so I'm just going to put my face over here. I don't know how much more stuff time-wise to talk about. I'm probably just going to do this topic because I can, because I find it interesting, and because actually it does pertain to Venezuela, Russia, and global geopolitics going forward. Energy is that important. So we're going to talk about energy. Well, I'm over there. I should be over there. That's better. Right, I'm going to start just with this. I don't know why. Recently, Trump posted, and this was not what he posted first. He said that American wind farms were killing American bald eagles, and he said, "Here's a bald eagle that's been knocked down," and it wasn't a bald eagle. It was somewhere else in the world. I don't know. It was in Mexico or somewhere, and he was just. So then he came out and said, "Eagles going down." So he kind of changed it, and the idea is that he's against wind turbines because he says they're not eco-friendly. But of course, this is absolute rubbish. It's like, should we have a question like, how many animals has oil killed in the existence of large scale oil extraction and oil spills at sea, oil spill? Have you seen what goes on in places where they're getting it out of the land, like Nigeria and places where they have spills there? It's horrific, right? Oil is horrific for the death of animals. Like, if you're gonna, wind turbines are going to knock down some birds here and there. There is no doubt that they are going to kill some birds. But if you're going to put wind against oil in terms of how much, wildlife has been killed, I think you're onto a losing one there. But anyway, Trump is just dead against wind. I think it's largely because there's a wind farm out to sea off his Scottish golf course, and he hates it. He thinks it spoils the view. So he's dead. He's anti-wind, and he's also been lobbied to the hilt by the American fossil fuels industry. So we're now going to look at, and I did this yesterday to a degree, but we're going to look at a little bit more detail at energy, just to give ourselves a sense of what's going on in the world. So we have Christmas saying, in the 38 years since I joined the electrical industry, I have heard every scare story going. Grid collapse, blackouts, rationing, the grid cannot cope with 10%, then 20% renewables. Renewables cannot scale up. Coal will never end. Gas will always be number one generation. None of those came true. And it's so true. We hear so many kickbacks against clean energy, and all of it is just bunkum, generally speaking. Now, Arnaud Bertrand here says China has now started installing, and this could be massive. I just heard about this yesterday, so I'm interested in this. I haven't looked in major detail at this, but this is huge. China's now started installing 20 megawatt offshore wind turbines. You just need 50 of those to match the capacity of an average 1 gigawatt nuclear power plant. So 1 gigawatt nuclear power plant requires just 50 of these in operation. This might sound trivial, but think for a minute how much easier it is to install a wind turbine than it is to build a nuclear power plant. The last nuclear reactor in the US, Vogtle Units 3 and 4, took 11 years to build, whereas you can install a wind turbine in just 2 to 3 weeks. Yes, really. There's an insane differential, a couple of weeks versus 11 years, with, of course, immense implications on costs. It's much cheaper to build with a much safer risk profile. For one thing, you start generating revenue in weeks instead of getting your capital tied up during more than a decade. As a reminder, Vogtle's cost overruns actually bankrupted Westinghouse, America's flagship nuclear company, in 2017. No major energy company can possibly get bankrupt over a wind turbine project. This is why, again, it's positively insane to believe that green energy is a scam. The numbers are right there. The only scam is convincing people otherwise, which ironically favors China. They power their factories with cheap, rapidly deployed energy while we get the culture war. So it's just really frustrating that you get all this pushback against renewables. Yep, you need an energy mix. Yeah, wind's not going to blow all the time. Solar's not going to, you're not going to have the sun all day long, which is why batteries, these come in concert with battery technology and huge storage at the moment. That's why Tesla is doing kind of like the back end of what Tesla does isn't really about selling cars. It's about building huge batteries to be able to store the power so that you can draw on it later. So I've got solar panels on my roof, and they churn out power during the day, and then they charge up a big battery, and then at night that draws down from the power you have used. So it's about, I can still have power at nighttime, even though solar only acts during the day. So it's about battery capacity, and then you've got huge jumps in batteries going on right now. It's just massive. The news, like I keep saying, the new sodium batteries are amazing. And Australia's grid operator is shifting from coal to clean power. He's saying that is inevitable in the country's march to 100% renewables. Quote, "Our coal plants are breaking down. They're retiring. They're getting replaced by the least cost energy, which is renewables backed with storage. We'll have a bit of gas for the winter doldrums. That is just what's happening. It's just fact. This is what's happening, whether you are environmental or not. Like, it's the things, coal-fired power stations are old, they're breaking down, they're too expensive, and therefore we're going to replace them. What are we going to replace them with? The cheapest one that's cheapest for taxpayers or for people who consume electricity for businesses. Okay, let's replace it with the cheapest ones. What are the cheapest ones? Nuclear, gas? No, solar and wind. Okay, well, that's what we do. So it's just the frustration that Trump turns off a wind turbine farm when it's 80% completed, a solar farm, because he's ideologically against it, is stupid at a time when you need them for data centers. Coal generation has now fallen in both China and India. In 2025, coal down 3% in India, 1.6% in China. The quote, "The simultaneous fall in coal-powered electricity is the world's biggest coal consumer in the world's biggest coal-consuming countries. Had not happened since 1973. This is major. So just get a sense of what's going on around the world and wonder whether, from an American point of view, you're backing the wrong horse. Solar overtook coal for the first time in the EU in 2024, bringing renewables to nearly half the electricity mix. What milestones did the EU renewables revolution hit in 2025? Answers in our upcoming European electricity review. I'll be interested in seeing that. But the Ember report was so worth reading. If you get a chance to read the Ember report on energy, it is very, very good. It's just a really good read. So solar and wind, they're really going in the right direction. That's in the EU there. 2024 saw us in Britain break records for running Britain's electricity system more cleanly than ever before, bolstering energy security so we can produce these things ourselves at home. We don't have to buy in oil and gas, although we produce them ourselves, but then we can export that. If we create this stuff ourselves at a reasonable price, then that's really good. So, and affordability for all. It included operating the grid at 97.7% zero carbon for the first time in the history. That's amazing. 97.7% zero carbon for the first time in history at one point. So that's really impressive. Look at wind, look at nuclear, look at solar, and hydro as well. Hydro up in Scotland is useful. So then you look at, okay, look at the car industry. I said that Norway last year, 97% of new cars were electric cars. Now, should we call Denmark done with the transition now? It's looking like their electric car demands are basically supplanting the ICE, which is internal combustion engine, not the people that run around arresting others in the US. So Denmark, December 25th, BEV trajectory. So the trajectory, there you go. Anyway, the point is that Denmark is moving in the right direction. Here is I think these are new buys, are they? No, or this might be the existing. This is 12-month trailing market shares by fuel type. So you've got diesel here, and you've got electric vehicles coming up and up and up, and everything's moving in the right direction. It's about this idea of future-proofing and just getting on the right side of history. In the UK, so today there's a massive auction, and Ed Miliband, our environment secretary, is involved in all this energy transition, has now announced that we're getting an absolute ton of wind being given permission off the coasts, particularly of the UK, and we're getting loads of reasonably priced energy, which the people on the right are really going nuts about today, and they're disinforming people. So anyway, prices come in 19% below the ceiling price, much lower than where many people expected. 8 new offshore projects giving 8.4 gigawatts have been given the go ahead, and this is where they are. So lots of offshore projects have been given a green light. So today, UK government secures a record 8.4 gigawatt of offshore wind at AR7 auction round. So they auction basically the energy, and it's coming in at an average £91 per megawatt hour in England, £89 per megawatt hour in Scotland, roughly a fifth below the price limit. So this is looking really, really good. And loads of people on the right are shouting that this is absolutely wrong. So Claire Coutinho, who I think was an energy advisor to the Conservatives, shadow energy secretary. So she's a Conservative, saying this is nonsense. You compare gas is 55, blah, blah, blah. And all of this is just incorrect. So there's loads of disinformation. People comparing new wind to old gas. You want to compare new wind to new gas. So if you're going to give us gas prices, don't give us the existing gas prices. You want to, if you're going to build a new gas-fired power station, or you getting new gas in, what's that going to look like? Our auction today delivers new renewable power that is cheaper to build and operate than building new gas. Here are a few key facts. Cost of building and operating new gas is £147 per megawatt hour. The strike price we agreed today was an average of £91 per megawatt hour. That means the price of wind we secured is 40% lower than the cost of building and operating a new gas power plant. Comparing the wholesale price of gas today with the strike price agreed for offshore wind is like comparing apples with oranges. If we want to keep the lights on and meet growing demand for power, we have to build. The choice is not whether to build, but what to build. And our answer is clean, homegrown power that we control. Our answer is that we should build new renewables because they are cheaper to build and operate than new gas. That's I just wanted to have a little section on energy because it's a big day in the UK energy world, and just say we need to be backing stuff that's cheap, but also stuff that's clean and stuff that gives us energy security. And all of those are met with renewables. And I would then back that up with nuclear as well, personally. Now, Richard Tice, who is a former head of Reform, he's now the kind of number 2 at Reform, says Reform UK reiterates warning to renewable investors and lenders. Today's colossal renewable energy subsidy auction result continues a lie. Electricity under these subsidies will be some 50% higher price than last year's average on 20-year inflation-linked contracts. Reform UK is again warning developers, investors and lenders that any new renewable projects from here on will not be recognised as valid. So he's arguing against that. You've got this pitched battle, but my position is that all around the world, you're seeing from grassroots to major government sort of infrastructure decisions, renewables are on the way up and hydrocarbons are on the way down. Now, it's good news at the moment that oil is as low as it is, but if you're talking about investing when it's that low in Venezuelan oil, you're going to really struggle. And so I think that's all pretty interesting for me. I'm fascinated in this stuff, and seeing the movements I think has been really encouraging. Certainly in the UK, I'm really happy there, and people individually. It's really interesting looking at the reports on the growth of solar and wind. In terms of solar, talked yesterday in the live stream about places like Pakistan. From the grassroots, it's not anymore something that the middle classes and people with some spare cash have in terms of putting solar panels on their roofs. It's actually now affordable, and people in Pakistan are just putting them on their roofs because it's the cheapest way of getting reliable electricity. And actually, you're seeing that in Eastern Europe. Places like Poland and other nations in Eastern Europe have been able to really jump on the solar bandwagon, and with government sort of incentives, but also just generally, you're getting micro production really flourishing. Right. I said that's the last thing I'm going to say. I've been speaking way too long. My missus has just got back. I'm just going to let you know what, or should I do a separate video on this? What's taken place in the Ford plant? No. Should I talk to you about Ford? Yeah, I will. I'll talk to you about Ford. I was going to do a separate video, but I might not have time now. Okay, let's share this. The last section is going to be about what's happened with Ford. And actually, this is kind of connected to the environment a little bit as well. I don't know if you've heard, but Donald Trump was called a paedophile protector by someone. He visited a Ford manufacturing facility and someone shouted at him, paedophile protector. So you just about heard someone shout paedophile protector, right? And this is because he's not doing anything with the Epstein files, and most of what we can understand in his actions in global geopolitics can have something to do with distraction away from the Epstein files. Now, he then put his finger up, he flipped him the bird, which is really unpresidential. And I don't know if he also mouthed or said F you. Yeah. So during a visit to a Ford plant, President Trump was caught on camera flipping off a worker who allegedly shouted paedophile protector at him, an apparent reference to his past ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Trump responded with F you and the middle finger. Yeah, so he swore at him and gave the middle finger. Now, you know, be presidential, mate. Take it on the chin, move on, right? Not everyone likes you. But to stick your middle finger up and say F you back to him is, well, A, it's pretty childish, but also you could argue, some people argue he's got dementia, right? I think it's plausible. And some people say, I can tell you for free that my dad now swears more than he ever did, and his vetoes are gone, right? So his inhibitions have been erased by having dementia. And I think you could argue the same is happening with Trump. So there's an awful lot of times where he just doesn't have any veto anymore. There's no holding back his thoughts or his impulses. So he's becoming more and more impulsive and says things that are just inappropriate. He's sworn a number of times in public. I know Greg Terry's had an issue with this. Greg Terry is like a former pastor, or he's a pastor, one of my fellow YouTubers who, you know, doesn't like swearing. He's quite a clean guy. And he's like, he hates it when Trump does stuff like this. Yeah, so the White House is responding to the TMZ video of Trump flipping someone off at the Ford plant today, saying in a statement to Sam Waldenberg, quote, "A lunatic was wildly screaming expletives in a complete fit of rage, and the president gave an appropriate and unambiguous response." Can you tell me if this denotes a lunatic wildly screaming expletives in a complete fit of rage? So you can hear him just about say paedophile protector. So this is the moment. There's not something before this. There's a massive fit of rage. This is the moment. And then someone else starts going, woo, afterwards, right? So, oh, sorry, I don't think you're seeing that. So here we go. You weren't seeing that. I'll play that again. Pedophile protector, woo, right? Now, like, I know the government lie all the time, but this is just getting ridiculous now. Like calling the woman that was shot the other day, Nicole Renee Good, a domestic terrorist, like straight away. No, no, I don't think you can do that. A lunatic wildly screaming expletives, pedophile protector, that's not wildly screaming and it's not expletives. That someone shouted the words pedophile protector. Wildly screaming expletives in a complete fit of rage. And the president gave an appropriate and unambiguous response. It's just not true. Anyway, the UAW worker Trump cursed out at the Ford plant after being called a pedophile protector has been suspended pending an investigation. Last I heard, so you know you've had these things where people have been really racist to customers. There's one at an ice cream parlor recently, and she went on this racist rampage against these black people, I think they were, or certainly people of color who were at the hatch, and it was horrific. It was horrific. And then the people on the right did this fundraiser for them, and then they had earned like $200,000 out of losing a job from being horrifically racist, and then they get given $200,000 for that. You're thinking, really? That's all that's doing is condoning horrific behavior. I don't think this is horrific behavior. I think this is a justified outburst to Trump, and it's something that he needs to hear. He needs to hear that people think he's protecting pedophiles, and he needs to hear that from the workforce as well, from like people that he'd otherwise think were in his pocket. Now, the idea that they have suspended this guy pending an investigation, okay, fair enough. Like, you can imagine that's going to happen. The worker says he has no regrets and believes he's been targeted for embarrassing Trump in front of his allies. That's power disciplining dissent in real time. But there's apparently been a fundraiser for him, and the last time I looked, it was 120,000. That's the kind of fundraiser I can get behind. Now, Ford has caved to MAGA pressure and suspended TJ Sabula, the auto worker who called Trump a pedophile protector to his face today. I quote, "I don't feel as though fate looks upon you often, and when it does, you better be ready to seize the opportunity," Sabula said. Like, I was there. It was the right thing to do at the right time. It was fate. I'm happy I did it. Now, Lincoln Square. Now, we hear this quite a lot. And I heard rumors about this the other day at the Oilitzex thing. And Adam Kinzinger talks about this as a former representative for the Republican Party. He always talks about how Trump stinks, right? So Trump apparently wears an adult nappy, an adult diaper, and he's arguably might be incontinent, and he certainly stinks. Lots of people, the last one was he smells like rotting roast beef or something. This is this ongoing thing that actually people, and you've got some people caught on camera, like turning their nose up, physically turning their nose up when they're next to Trump because they don't like the smell. That's happened a number of times. Lincoln Square, who are Republicans who are anti-Trumpers, said our Detroit staff, so Detroit is where that Ford factory was, have received reports from Ford workers that the president's body odor was, quote, like bad breath mixed with feces. I can't describe it, but I'll never forget it. I know that's, is it worth reporting on that? I mean, this is a really common criticism that Trump absolutely stinks. So Trump speaks accidentally on a hot mic exposing his own corruption. His hot mic incident tells Ford workers that the company chair, Bill Ford, quote, calls me all the time. Can we get rid of the environmental piece of garbage? Which means the legislation. Ford's chair lobbied to axe environmental garbage rules. The Trump administration is obliged, killing EPA standards via EO 14155 executive order. Then Ford gifted a Mar-a-Lago F450 vanity truck with his face on the side. So Trump tells people in this hot mic incident that the CEO of Ford, the owner of Ford, phones him up, says, can you get rid of this environmental garbage? And now we hear that we're cancelling the absurd tailpipe emission standards. So now cars can emit whatever noxious gases they want, and there's no regulations for that.
And we're canceling the EPA's absurd tailpipe emission standard, one of the worst ever. and I revoke the California emissions waiver to stop San Francisco communists from regulating automobiles all over our nation, all over our world.
So it's just like, yeah, I'm just going to favor big corporations over the environment. And you know, those big cities full of all those cars that belch out the smoke. Well, I don't want electric cars. I don't want renewable energy sources. So I want big coal and oil and gas power stations to belch out whatever. And we're going to repeal all these environmental legislations and regulations. And your cars are going to not be motivated. Your car makers are not going to be motivated to cut back emissions from their vehicles. And do you know what? Bill Ford's phoned me up and asked for that, and I've given it to him, and he's given me a nice car. So thank you very much for that. Result: EV investments crash. So electric vehicle investments crash. Ford lost $1.2 billion last quarter because of so the USA. So you just come out with new electric vehicles numbers, and North America. I think USA one stat I saw that they grew 1%, whereas everyone else in the world is growing like 20, 30, 50% electric vehicle sales. One was that North America dropped, and that's actually based on Canada dropping, and that could be because Canada aren't buying Teslas. I don't know, but either way, North America is an outlier, with the rest of the world electrical vehicles are growing, and Ford are basically, we want to sell petrol and diesel cars because that's what we make more of. They do make electric cars. In fact, our next car that we're getting to replace our I do secondhand lease of a car. It's the cheapest way I could get a car. I've got an electric car, and it's a Hyundai Ioniq, and we're now getting a Ford Puma because it was cheap as chips. In fact, it was so cheap they stopped doing it because anyway, I'm getting a brand new Ford Puma electric for cheaper than I've ever had another car. So like, they're obviously like trying to make these electric cars, and then they had so many of them, and then everyone was like, yeah, we want them. And then they're like, oh my God, we got rid of too many of these and we don't make any money off them. But anyway, I'm happy as Larry because I'm getting a cheap electric car, which is brand new. I've never had a brand new car in my life. And I've got a brand new car now, and it's cheaper than all the other cars I've ever had in my life. So it's like, what a weird situation. But anyway, like Ford do make electric cars, but yeah, interesting that they reckon they're losing money. So they phone up their mate Trump. Trump changes regulations, and then there you go. Workers suffered as jobs vanish. This guy will do anything for a kickback. So anyway, there you go. And the last thing, this is the Kupil, the guy that's in trouble for being a real Trump sympathizer. He interviewed him for CBS. Remember, CBS is now lost. While you're here, guys, while you're here, it's worth knowing, because I had this for another section that I don't have time, but CBS lost 1/5 of its audience in just 4 days. So now that they've got this guy who's a real Trump sycophant, and they keep saying all these wonderful things about Trump and pulling stuff from their 60 Minutes news segments, people are now understanding that CBS is just a Trump megaphone, and they've lost, 23% in viewership compared with the same period a year ago. CBS Evening News, now under new anchor Tony Dokapil, is down 23%. The decline underscores a challenge facing CBS News and its new editor-in-chief, Barry Wise. Anyway, this is Dokapil talking to Trump at the Ford factory. He says the CEO of Ford said he's got 5,000 open mechanics jobs. He can't find people. So like, there's a need for people to do these mechanical jobs. What do you say about that? So Trump should surely say, okay, we need to work on apprenticeships. We need to get people training. Yeah. Trump, he's just got no idea how to message in some of these like technical areas. That's a good thing, Tony. That means it's vibrant. You're going to have a thing called robots. Oh, brilliant. So we're going to just replace people with robots. Yeah, we've got 5,000 job openings. Get rid of them. Don't need them. Don't need people to have jobs. Replace them with robots. Now, you can justify that. You say, and we're going to replace 5,000 car workers with 5,000 robot mechanic workers. That's one way of maybe getting around that. But to just openly say, hey, I'm not worried about people losing their jobs because we got robots to do the work for them, is not what people want to hear in the employment sector. Just absolutely unbelievable. But yeah, there you go. That's Donald Trump for you. I just don't think he thinks things through, really. He's married to Katie. She got copied in on one of those things about the loss of the viewership. So Katie Tur, I think, is married to Dockerpill, and in one of those kind of, oh my goodness, CBS is in trouble, you might want to have a word to your husband here. So anyway, there you go. Right, let's just get back to saying thank you very much to you guys before I have to shoot off, and say hello to my real family, not you guys. You guys are my international family. Rick from the Netherlands. Hi, Jonathan. What is your view on Richard Wolff's vision on economies of Europe versus China? Economies of US versus Europe versus China. He makes some really interesting points. I don't know. You're going to have to somehow send me that. There is something that someone sent me about Wolff earlier. Somebody in, was it Pierre, sent me, this proves Trump knows he's in big trouble. Wolff inside Trump's head. Michael Wolff joins Joanna Coles to trace the yeah. So no, that looks like something different, but it could be an interesting watch, because it apparently indicates that Trump knows he's in trouble in terms of, I presume, polling and whatnot. But I don't know about that, Rick. I'll have to look into that. Wizard of Ooze, happy birthday! Shout out to Rick the Ukrainian. Happy birthday, Rick the Ukrainian. Not Rick from the Netherlands, different Rick. But yeah, happy birthday, Rick. I'll send him a message. Thanks for that. Wolff states, here you go, that the US has hollowed out its economy, infrastructure, etc. by outsourcing. Cheap is good. Tariffs will not undo what has been teared down over decades. The rich profit at our cost. Yes. So I talked about this some degree yesterday, in that there's also this jobless boom whereby you get corporations making lots of money still, but they learnt how to deal with having fewer people on the payroll from COVID. So they got rid of loads of people from COVID, or they furloughed people or whatever. They weren't working, and they're like, we've still got to cope, and they managed to become more efficient. So when COVID then finished, they didn't really rehire. There was a big bounce back, but a number of corporations didn't rehire to the same tune that they had before COVID. This is how I understand it. So they got used to working more in a more lean fashion, and then AI's come along and continued to replace jobs. So you've got these companies making staggering amounts of money still. They're still making a profit. So you look at like the stock market and you think, well, it's brilliant. It's at record levels. And you look at the shares, and you look at, people's, maybe pension pots doing well from the share value. And you look at certain indicators, and he's saying, okay, CEOs are making absolute loads of money here. The economy's doing fine. But meanwhile, inflation's gone up. People's wages haven't kind of gone up enough, or they don't have the jobs, they're not being rehired. So actually, we talked about as a percentage of GDP. So yesterday I gave you the stats that the value of people's work, or the value that goes back to the workers, is now at 53.8% of GDP, and it was at 54 point something. So in other words, the amount of money that America is making, it used to be more went back to the workers in terms of shares and wages and all salaries and bonuses. 54 point, and it used to be higher and higher, and it's been getting lower and lower. So in other words, what the US is going through, it's a situation where the rich are getting richer and companies are making more money, but that money is not being reinvested in the workforce, and the workforce are seeing less and less of the GDP coming back to them, and then that translates into them struggling more and inflation hurting, and then Trump comes along and he makes that worse by introducing tariffs, which are inflationary. And then he's like, well, you need to buy American steel instead of getting cheap steel from abroad. Okay, but that's inflationary because American steel is way more. And then you're extracting tariffs from importers. And so all of this is inflationary. And the point is that the workers, the people in the bottom 50%, maybe, I don't know, more, whatever, of the economy are getting unfairly kind of punished by the American economic situation. So this idea that you've got a hollowing out and it's probably not just Trump, right? Of course, it's not just Trump. This has been happening over time. But I think the whole world will have to deal with AI and tech. I know this is a bit almost Malthusian, but we need to deal with how to run a country, how to operate a society with, pressures of productivity when you have AI and tech taking our jobs, but actually it's the Luddites, not Malthusian, it's the Luddites, you know, the idea that, oh, we've got combine harvesters coming, or we've got plowshares coming along, we're going to be out of jobs. Actually never really happened, but I think this is definitely something that is genuinely happening now. The Green Party in the UK about 8 years ago, I think it was, had a white paper, a consultation paper on moving down to a 4-day working week because they saw this coming. Now, people kind of dismissed it at the time, but the Green Party in the UK was spot on under Caroline Lucas. She knew that this was genuinely going to be something we're going to have to contend with. And now people are thinking we're going to have to go down to a 4-day working week, but pay people the same amount of money, but for doing less work, because actually there's not enough work because we've got the pressures of AI and tech and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, so I think we are in for interesting times. And I think globally, economies around the world are going to be struggling for a whole suite of reasons in 2026. And we need to be prepared for it. Yeah, interesting times. And as for the US here, Rick, yeah, probably Wolf is onto something there. Yeah. And it was your birthday yesterday, Rick from the Netherlands. So Rick from Ricks from many places are close to their birthdays. Look, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your support. Thank you to the mods. I really do hope that this was of interest. I know I've picked up random topics here, and it's not going to be for everyone, but I just talk about what I find interesting, and I hope really that you find it interesting as well. And thank you for being here. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. I don't think I'll have time to do any more tonight, and I've got to edit a book that I've pretty much completed writing, and it's a very complex book by point of fact that it's stuff that I wrote back in 2020 to 2022 when my brain was working a lot better than it is now in terms of writing, and I need to relearn what I'm editing essentially in terms of biblical exegesis and history about the Exodus and whether it happened or not, and what the evidence is. And me and my co-author, we need to get that book out soon because it's been too long in the making. So I'll probably do a bit of editing tonight. Anyway, in the meantime, take care, and I shall speak to you soon. Toodle pips. Before I go, Rob, you're a legend. Rob Cook is awesome. I do hope to go out to Ukraine. This is one of my long goodbyes, isn't it? I do hope to go out to Ukraine. May try and go out in the Easter time, and hopefully, Rob, you'll be coming along with us. If we can wing that, that would be good. If we can sort that out, not wing it, but if we can sort that out, that'd be wonderful, and take some vehicles out to Ukraine. Thank you for Paolo Adam. I really appreciate that. Gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you, Paolo. And thank you to all of you. You are awesome. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.